Now, the gap between the number of electric vehicles and public charging points widened in all but one region last year.
Yeah, and this comes as electric car drivers faced long queues at charging stations over this weekend.
Well, let's speak now to Managing Director at MotorVise, Fraser Brown, who is here to tell us more about some of the issues affecting electric cars. Really good to see you this morning, Fraser. Thank you for joining us. There is this push, isn't there, for us all to buy electric vehicles, but quite frankly, the infrastructure just isn't there yet, is it? I mean, the latest figures suggest that there is one public charger to every 36 electric cars.
You're absolutely right. The biggest challenge that we have for battery vehicle adoption in the UK is the charging infrastructure. In certain regions, so for example, the northwest of England, for every new battery electric vehicle registered, there was only 300, for every 300 battery electric vehicles registered, there was only one charging point installed. So, there are certain parts of the UK where it's a bit of a desert for charging infrastructure. And I guess if you've got an electric vehicle, as I have, they are the future. I would never go back to an internal combustion engine, but I have the luxury of having a domestic charger. So I can get my electricity overnight from 7.5 pence per kilowatt. So I can fill a car up that has 300-mile range just under for £7.50 with Octopus Energy. So I have a real kind of desire to talk about electric vehicles with people. The big hole is for those people that perhaps live in a flat, don't have access to a domestic charger, because my 7.5 pence per kilowatt overnight charging rate is 65 pence for many people who have to go to public charging points. So not having enough charging points, yes, may cause queues. I have to say I've only ever queued once in the years that I've owned an electric vehicle. But the biggest issue is there isn't enough competition between the electric charging points. So they can almost charge what they like at this point. There isn't the competition that you have, say, between petrol stations. So it becomes a real negative if you do have to, one day in 10 actually charge at a public charging point, because most people don't use more than 300 miles, which is kind of the average range we're seeing for new electric vehicles at the moment. Most people won't do more than 300 miles in a day, so won't use a kind of a public charging point on a regular basis. But if you don't have a domestic charger, you're at a huge disadvantage. And if you look at places like London, where more people live in locations where their domestic dwelling is detached from the location of where they park their car at night, that is a real challenge for some people.
And Fraser, another dramatic reverse ferret, as sure as night follows day yesterday. Because, of course, until now, you can be tax-free in electric cars. Suddenly, 6 pence a mile to drive an electric vehicle. Because guess what? The government is losing loads of tax, so they tempt you in with the carrot of free tax, then woof, you get hit with the stick, 6p a mile. Is there any wonder inquiries into electric vehicles are 65% down year on year?
It's a real shame. This government used to be very pro electric vehicle adoption, and the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders have been calling the government recently to not only invest more in the electric vehicle infrastructure and charging points, but also to consider what incentives can be put in place for people to be buying new electric vehicles. Now, here's a little tip for people. If you are considering buying an electric vehicle, now is the time. Used vehicles are now as cheap as they're ever going to be in the electric world. You can actually buy an electric vehicle for a very similar price, or even lower than its petrol equivalent. So I would strongly encourage people, anybody who's thinking about buying an electric vehicle and would consider a used one, now is an amazing time to be going out and buying a used battery electric vehicle. So, yeah, I would say there are some real opportunities. With every problem, there are opportunities. And the biggest opportunity right now is buying a used electric vehicle. They're incredible value for money right now.
OK, Fraser, we talk a lot about carrots and sticks, and there's an awful lot of sticks being beaten onto motorists. We saw yesterday Glasgow launched its version of the ultra-low emission zone. 60 quid fines, automatic fines for anybody driving into Glasgow. It seems there's an absolute war on petrol vehicles, diesel vehicles But the government doesn't really seem to have a plan B. I mean, as well as nowhere to plug them in, we don't have enough power stations to power the network if everybody got an electric car. Isn't this just a case of eco-zealotry getting ahead of reality?
Do you know, it's going a bit nuts, to be honest with you. The next thing that we've got from the government coming up in a couple of years' time is going to start putting vehicle excise duty on electric vehicles, which is the only incentive left, really, to take on an electric vehicle. You've then got the ULEZ zone, like you've mentioned, up in north of the border as well. They're beginning on that same thing, where, you know, people are being beaten up consistently for driving a non-electric vehicle. So, yeah, it's challenging at the moment being a motorist. And, you know, there's a balance, isn't there? I actually don't believe where I live in rural parts of England, you can manage without a vehicle. You know, we absolutely do. We have one bus a week comes to certain villages around here, and that's called a demand response bus. So you've actually got to telephone to get it to come along. So, you know, public transport, which is what they say to everybody, you know, isn't an option in many parts of the United Kingdom. So, you know, we are all going to need personal transportation. Obviously, electric vehicles are far more environmentally friendly. And, yeah, it just seems that we've got a government at the moment that is not on the side of the motorist, not on the side of the electric vehicle. And there's an awful lot more stick out there than carrot. In fact, I think the last carrot, as I say, is getting dropped very soon. And at the moment, we've seen, you know, a significant reduction in inquiries for electric vehicles. So manufacturers have gone down the road that they've been led to go down, right from when we were part of the EU to now we're not part of the EU. The government's supposedly adopting a similar approach. But you know, it's kind of the carrot's been dangled and then taken away for the manufacturers. So we desperately plead with the government, let's get some investment into the electric vehicle infrastructure in this country. Let's give people that don't have a domestic charging point with access to 7.5 pence per kilowatt electricity the opportunity to own an electric vehicle, because there is genuinely no opportunity for people who live remotely from their vehicles, i.e. in a flat where they don't have their own drive and their own electric source. There's no opportunity for them to own electric vehicles. And then on the other side, you introduce ULEZ zones where people have to pay a fortune to drive a battery electric, an internal combustion engine to their own property. You know, we need to get a joined up approach. And right now it doesn't feel joined up to me.
Fraser Brown talking immense amounts of common sense this morning. Thank you for joining us on GB News. Thank you.